Welcome to another edition of Maverick University. I'm your host, David Hallberg. Joining me today is Dr. Ken Anderson. Dr. Anderson was a church member at Northwest Bible is a church member at Northwest Bible Baptist Church for almost 50 years. And
Correct.
The church is about to turn 50 years
Correct.
next year, and we're on staff at the church for 27 years. Now retired, but continues to teach at Providence Baptist College.
Correct.
Brother Anderson, I want to talk with you about one of your classes that you teach, church finance. It's one of those classes that hasn't always been required of our pastoral majors, but recently was added to the list of required classes, and I think it's a wonderful idea, very practical, and very needed. And so today, I basically took your course syllabus and just picked a topic, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about money security. Right. Basically, when a dollar hits the offering plate, even before that, what are the steps that a pastor should take in order to ensure that the highest standard is kept when securing God's money?
Well, anybody handling money, and that could be ushers, it could be money counters, it could be the financial secretary, it could be anybody collecting money like in junior church. All those meet certain requirements. First of all, they must be a member of the church.
Sure.
Must have been a member of church for at least 1 year. They must be attending all faith services faithfully. They must be tithing regularly, gross income, personal separation, all those standards. But in addition to that, very importantly, they need to have confidentiality at the utmost because they're dealing with other people's money.
Sure, yeah.
So they need to hold that in confidence. And they also must not be under personal financial pressure themselves. We want to remove any temptation to them. So those are basically the requirements for anybody handling money in any form.
Well, you're talking about some very personal issues.
Oh, yes,
they can't
they are,
be,
yeah.
and but they're dealing with personal
Yes,
issues.
they are.
They're dealing with money, and it's nothing to trifle with. If somebody is not faithful to church, then how can I expect them to be faithful with handling something that is a huge temptation?
Correct. Yes.
So it starts with who are you picking to be
Correct.
those that are collecting the offering, and it extends then obviously all the way down the line from until it hits the bank. Anybody who handles that money.
Yeah. And the financial secretary, of course, whoever that is, whether that's a title or not, the one who is responsible for the bookkeeping, the accounting the contributions, keeping those records, writing the checks out to pay the bills, anybody that's in the office that does that. Of course, that's also very, 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 very important.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So the offering plates are passed. The ushers walk back to the back of the auditorium with the offering. I guess every church is a little bit different. In some cases, I've been in some churches before where they take the offering and all the offering plates are stacked. The offering is still in the plates and they're put on the Lord's Supper table, on the communion table at the front of the auditorium, which I guess, you can see that nobody's doing anything with the money, which I guess is a little bit of accountability. Right. We don't do that. No. We take it to the back and the ushers do something with it. And obviously there are procedures. Right. But is there a problem? Is there maybe some issues that could happen if you leave the offering at the front? Is there any problem with that, or is it just a preference?
Well, as long as it's a preference, but it's there, it's obvious during the service time, but you want your attention focused on the pulpit during the service time, not on the money in the Lord's Supper table. So for that purpose. But
if it's overflowing with cash.
Exactly, yeah. And but anyway, in our church, by the way, nobody can ever be alone with money singly. There always has to be at least two people with money. So when the offering is taken, let's talk about a general offering, then at least two of the ushers bag the money, and it's a locked bag. After it's put in the money, it's a locked bag, and that's delivered by them. They take that out to a secure place or secure person, and then they go back to the service.
Okay.
So that's the procedure that's followed there.
So these two ushers, they're collecting, they're verifying amounts at that
No,
time?
No,
just
all they're doing
simply,
is putting it in a bag.
But there's multiple witnesses that everything in the plates went in this bag, got locked.
Right. And this goes for people collecting money otherwise. Junior church, bus offerings, could be collecting for a camp, for any other thing. They do count. Two people count the money then, complete a special slip, but then they put that in a bag, locked bag, or a bag, and deliver it to a secure place just like everybody else. But the counting of the general offerings is not done by the ushers at all.
That would take a while.
They just bag it. Yep.
Yeah. And so that bag gets deposited into the church office, and obviously now in the church office, you need, once again, double accountability. Am I right?
Right, yeah. Then so the church decides when the offerings are going to be counted.
Okay.
We used to count them at night, and that got to be the wee hours sometimes. So generally it's the next day.
All right.
And it could be staff people, but it could be lay people. But we always have, for security people, we're talking security reasons, internal security and money handling, we're talking about 3 people involved in the counting of the money.
3 people.
They must be 3 people. They must be unrelated. It's preferable if they can rotate those 3 people also, so it's not the same 3 people. Preferable, but not necessary. But always 3 people.
So it's not the same team of 3 people. It's different people all the time, and you don't know. Yeah,
preferably.
Okay.
And the pastor selects those and approves those. They go into a locked room, no disturbances. They pour out the money. And then for the envelopes, they take the envelopes first and they divvy those up, depending on the size of the church and the amount of the offerings. They divvy those up. They check the envelopes to make sure that there's a name and that the amount on the total equals the sum of the parts, tithes and offerings, missions, building fund,
Church
and so on.
member made a math
Exactly
error.
right.
Okay.
And so they're responsible then for their portion of the envelopes.
Okay.
Otherwise, it could take a long time for one person to do that. So each one's responsible for that. Then they verify that the amount in the envelope is the same amount that's indicated on the outside of the envelope. Very, very important. And they count that, and if it's cash, they route cash on the envelope. If it's a check, they write the check number on the outside of the envelope.
Okay.
And then they rubber band their portion, put their name on it. Then 2 people count the loose change, the currency and the coin.
Got
2
it.
people, they count it separately each, and then they must agree on that amount. If they don't agree, then they count it over till they agree.
Got it.
So then that takes care of that. Then after that, they complete a special form showing the checks, showing the cash, showing the coin, all the totals and so on. All 3 people have to sign that. And then that goes to the financial secretary. But the money then is placed in a locked bag and put in a secure place. Now, if they're going to deposit right afterwards, then that's fine. Otherwise, it's a locked bag and put in a safe, like a safe or a vault, with special security procedures there, either a combination lock or two-person key lock and so on and so forth. So that takes care of the counting of the money.
The one thing that you said that maybe most people don't think about was the make sure that they're unrelated. Because in a lot of churches, people are related, and in some churches, maybe a smaller church, maybe a good portion of the church is related to each other.
And there you have no choice.
Yeah.
You have no choice.
But obviously that could be a conflict of interest.
Right. Exactly right.
Man, that's...
Yep.
And not only is it just keeping the people who are counting that money and handling the money accountable, but it's security for them too.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Because if there was any accusation brought,
correct,
you're covering them.
That's exactly
and so
right.
it's preventative and it's that's preventative in both fronts. Keeps fraud from happening and protects people from accusations of fraud.
Yep, exactly
Absolutely.
right. Yep.
So then it's in this secure location, waiting until the day that
it's going to be deposited.
It gets deposited.
Okay, so then you have 2 people, unrelated, and preferably not always the same 2 people.
Okay.
The financial secretary or whoever gives them the bag. One person has the bag. It's a locked bag. The other person has the key. In 2 separate cars. The one with the bag of money locked is in the first car. Following close behind is the person with the key to the bag.
Got it.
And they go to the bank, wherever that deposit is going to be made, try not to let another car between them. If that happens, then one of the cars, the lead car, pulls over and waits for the other one. They walk together by 2 into the bank, give that bag to the bank clerk or whatever with the key, and then the bank handles it from there.
Okay.
In some cases, now that's how we used to do it. Now, because we deposit so much money, the bank actually keeps the key. So they have it there all the time.
Okay.
So we just have the bag that's locked and brought to them. So that handles that, and that takes care of then the courier part of taking the money in there. So.
Yeah. So this handles it from the beginning all the way to the end, and the money is never physically touched again. It's just in the bank account.
Right.
But ultimately, that's not really the end of the money trail, honestly, because the money needs to be spent in some ways, in a way that's responsible.
Yep.
And without, I've heard stories of other churches and a guy who was trusted, someone who maybe met that criteria, yet still had some access to monies. Yeah. Can you talk about
Well, let me back up first. Yeah. Very important when you sort of clicks my memory. When they're counting checks, they have a rubber stamp that says for deposit only. The counters do.
Oh, okay.
So they can't take a check and use it themselves. They must stamp that so that already there it says for deposit only to the credit of Northwest Bible Baptist Church. So that's also very important there for that security reason. So
obviously we're in a day and age where our offerings are being taken differently than they have in the past. You've probably seen this change through the years where, cash, checks, and I imagine that amount is going down as people prefer maybe an online payment.
We encourage using offering envelopes. That's important for them in terms of tax deductibility if they're itemizing tax deductions. It's also important for the church to make sure that they have a record of that. If the person is ever audited for any reason, we have that as reinforcement. If it's a check, that's fine, but this envelope shows that. So that's evidence there. So if they get audited and it points back to the church, then the church gets audited, we have that offering envelope. But online, we encourage online giving because if the church has the proper program and policies set forth to process online, that's fine. And for those on the other end to give, that's fine too, because they have an automatic computer trail there. We have a paper trail without that. So,
how long do you keep those records for?
I believe the financial records are something like 7 years. Don't quote me on that, but they must be kept for a certain
number of years. That's what
I've
heard as well from other places. And so, you're really saving yourself some problems. God forbid a church member gets audited, but it'd be great if the IRS didn't have to come knocking on your church door and find you a disorganized mess on your financial paperwork.
And the next day then, for instance, the financial secretary, whoever's in charge of that, she's getting all these envelopes and so on and processing that. She enters in the contribution record, who gave what for which categories, and all that's added to the church's bookkeeping and accounting system. But another check, again, we're talking about money handling security, is the total offering deposit must always be greater than the total on the envelopes.
Yeah, if it's the other way around, you got a problem.
Because you always have loose currency and coin.
True.
And if the amount in the envelopes is greater than the amount of the deposit, then either the counters have made a mathematical error, or they've done something wrong there, innocently or not, or could be intentionally, or somebody is taking loose money out and embezzling. So that's another important check that the financial secretary performs on her end or his end, depending on that. So
it's check and cross-check.
Yeah, exactly right.
Talking about checks, I know that for our church anyway, when a check is written, there's a couple of signatures on it. Is that the same principle yet again, just another financial accountability aspect of it?
Well, with the stamp, of course, that takes care of that. But
I mean writing checks out.
Oh, writing checks out.
Yeah. So, we have a bill that comes in, and I know that on our church checks, there's two signatures.
That's another chapter. Yeah.
Is it? Okay. All right. Yeah.
In terms of the money after that, we require two signatures on a check.
Okay.
And we encourage never to be the pastors. Now that's impossible if a pastor's starting a church, but it ought to be two laymen or two staff people or a staff person and a layman signing the checks.
And this whole avoid the pastor touching the money issue applies for dealing with the money from the offerings getting deposited into the bank. If at all possible, the pastor should be completely hands-off on that.
Exactly right. Yep. Accusations, again. You want to avoid any appearance of evil. And, of course, somebody can make accusations. And that's why you never have one person alone with the money. By the way, if somebody collects money, like in the Bus Junior Church, one of the things many, many years ago, Pastor Gomez really ripped somebody's hide off for this. They put the offering from the junior church in the pulpit behind on the platform there for the junior church and forgot it was there.
Oh, no.
And somebody the next day found it there. Talk about unaccounted for money. Anybody could have taken that. So you got to, somebody has to be in control of that money all the time, at least two people. So
and
very
it's
important.
It's sacred.
Yeah, it is.
It's
the money is sanctified, holy, and it's consecrated to God. I mean, look what happened to Achan for touching the accursed thing.
Yes.
Look what happened to Uziel when he just touched innocently the ark, because that was sanctified. So this is God's money. And by the way, a big failure of churches, if they're not soul winning, of course, and they're not knocking doors and getting people involved, of course, but one of the biggest failures of churches is financial. They don't have the finances to keep the church running.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important. Church finance is very, very important. Any college student who's going to be a pastor or assistant pastor or anything, like you mentioned, it's now mandatory for them to take it, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Because that's God's money, and God and God is in charge of that money. And the pastor, by the way, is the steward, biblically, and legally he's the fiduciary. He's responsible for that as a fiduciary. He can be held legally liable if something's wrong with the finances of the church.
Wow. Everything's at stake there.
Very important. Exactly right.
And so big or small, doesn't matter if it's the junior church offering, Sunday school class offering, nursery offering.
Correct.
By virtue of having it been given to the Lord, we have every responsibility. And a lot of people might say, man, it's a lot of nitpicky, inconvenient rules to have, but they're for very good reason.
Exactly.
And it's just to preserve the monies that God's people have given not to the church,
but to the Lord.
Yeah.
Through the church.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brother Anderson. And we want to continue our conversations a little bit about church finance. We'll schedule another time to get you in studio.
Great.
So
thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Make sure that you check out our other YouTube videos on our channel, and make sure that you check out the audio-only platforms as well. Make sure that you like this video and that you share it with somebody who can be benefited by it. Thank you so much for joining us.